Hello and welcome, Susan. I have with me today Susan Hopkins, who's from the MEHRIT Centre in Ontario, Canada, coming all the way to us from Canada. Susan, can you just tell me a bit about yourself and a bit about the MEHRIT Centre?
Sure. So I am coming from Canada, and I'm the executive director of Dr. Stuart Shanker's organization. And many people, many in Australia, definitely across Canada and other places in the world, know of Stuart as the self-reg guy, And so I first met him about 10 years ago when I was in the Northwest Territories of Canada. So that's the very northern part. And I was early childhood and kindergarten coordinator for this area of Canada, and was looking at a kindergarten curriculum and reached out to this fellow interested, that was doing this research on self-regulation, and that's how I first met him, and it's what drew me here to Canada. But I've been an educator, I've been a teacher, I've been a vice principal, I've been an inclusion coordinator, I was the early childhood coordinator for the Northwest Territories, which is where I got a huge respect for all of the work in the early years. I've taught in post-secondary. I'm also a mom, and I'm at home like many of you watching, probably all of you. And I have a puppy downstairs, two kids in the next room, a partner that's hungry. It's 5 o'clock here, time difference. So yeah, it's a little bit about me. But I really, the MEHRIT Centre is the organization that does this work and reaches out. We offer courses and we do presentations and do all sorts of things to support others in their work to support well-being.
Susan, with all that background, what was it about self-regulation that first attracted you to it? Like, obviously, with early childhood, you thought it spoke to you as someone deeply meshed in the early education and care sector.
Yeah, well, I have to tell you, I in the late 90s, and I mean, I did a lot of years in inclusion, which is really child development. Okay, so and I thought I knew what self-regulation was. I talked about it, I wrote about it, I met with parents about it. But it really wasn't until I became really started immersing myself in the early years, that I realized there are actually different definitions of self-regulation. And the one that I had been working with all along was more like a manage yourself, self-regulated, manage your emotions, manage yourself, make good choices, plan these sorts of things. It was more along the self-regulated learning kind of understanding. And there would be children that I would look at and I would know there was more going on, and I always was able to sort of look at them with soft eyes. An elder gave me that language, with almost always able to know, even if I couldn't figure out, there was something more going on. I was a troubled kid myself, right? An at-risk kid in a lot of ways, especially in the teenage years. But there were things that I couldn't resolve. And all of a sudden I discovered Stuart Shanker and the idea of psychophysiological understanding of self-regulation, which is about managing stress, not managing behavior, right? It's about understanding ourselves and relationships and managing stress. And it was just like light bulb, light bulb, light bulb, light bulb, light bulb. And I reached out to him, and I started learning more. I worked with him on and off in different ways for 5 years before he said, come and run my organization. So it really spoke to me because it answered questions. It helped me make sense of my teenage years. It helped me figure out, how to look at the children that struggle differently, how to look at others differently, how to, it started to give me some of the hows, but also tons of hope. So that's what drew me in.
I can understand that. I've got an adult daughter who acquired a brain injury a few years ago, and the more I've been reading about it, the more I'm going, oh, now I can put that into practice here, or now I understand what's happening there.
Yeah.
How would you describe self-reg in your own words?
So
It's
self-reg is,
very like a kind of an encapsulated explanation. I've listened to a lot of Stuart's videos where he says, I'll explain this in 60 seconds. And at the end of it, I'm going, no, you haven't.
it's so challenging in a way, and I'm not much better at it's really a difficult, in a way it is easy to nutshell. He nutshells it as understanding how we manage stress, right? So it's how we manage stress, the energy involved in managing stress, and how we recover from that. But that can sound like here's your 10 steps to, try some deep breaths, and it's really about the science understanding of what's going on in the brain and body. And I like to think of it as imagine that you have the Fitbit of the future, or whatever smartwatch. You want to imagine that it can read your heart rate. Okay, so heart rate is an indicator of stress. So increased heart rate is an indicator of stress. But let's just imagine it could measure when your brain goes into a fight or flight response, when it goes into freeze, when it's in learning brain, when your nervous system is being cued for safety. When, like, just imagine it could read the neurotransmitters of stress. And so somebody's sitting in front of you, your child has just, yelled at you, I hate you, and you look at them and you're hurt and you're mad, and then you're yelling back. But you could have this Fitbit and you could see into their stress response and yours on top of that, right? And so it's like this way of looking at beneath the behavior, to realize that there's more going on, and to focus on what's beneath the iceberg is another way of thinking of it. So, I mean, a nutshell of it is really about managing stress. We look across 5 domains. We think about the biological, the physical stuff, the emotion, the cognitive, the tax time comes, the social, being in a room with too many people, not being with people when we really need them, the pro-social, taking on the stress of others, worried about what others are thinking. And that it's also about all of that. And then it's this whole restoration side as well. You see, I'm not much better at nutshelling it than he is, but that's what it's about, right? And it's tons of science, but it's really about trying to figure out how to live it in your everyday life. So to become aware of your stress, think of it like, a sneeze is coming on. Notice it's coming on. Nobody else knows that, but recognizing what you need and what to do for yourself in that moment.
And how would you explain the difference between the Shanker self-reg method and more general self-regulation?
So first of all, there's at least 447 different definitions of self-regulation. So when I do workshops, I'll often ask people, what's your definition of self-regulation, and get them to write it down. And I make it safe for them, because it's not, if you write one that's different than mine, right, which is about managing stress, and the energy that gets gobbled up to manage that stress. And when I say energy, I don't mean woo, I mean glucose, right? So the glucose is our primary mode of energy. And then we have some backup energy that we can tap into, and then to recover from that. So the recovery is the real key, right? But most of those definitions are self-control. So it's about managing yourself, managing your emotions. It can be about social emotional learning. It's not that these aren't important, but they are different. So a lot of honestly, most of the approaches to self-regulation are either fully in the self-control or a lot in the self-control, right? So they assume everything is make a better choice, make a good decision, take accountability for your actions, try harder. It has more of this sort of side of things about it being about suppressing an emotion. And that's all fine and dandy when we can. But you and I have both had those moments in our lives when we couldn't hold something back, right? You scoot to the fridge for, your I don't know, your chips or your chocolate bars, or your too many glasses of wine, or you yell at somebody that you don't really feel angry at, or you get really emotional or something small. We've all had these moments of things just sort of happen to us. And again, if you could see the Fitbit of the future, it's not just the idea up here in this part of the brain, right? The prefrontal cortex. It's not just a decision. It's a reaction. It's a body. It's a reaction that's happening. That's like laying a platform especially when we feel unsafe, but when we feel depleted, all of these sorts of things. So it matters, because if you go with the self-control sort of definitions, when somebody is not self-regulated, so that means have their energy and tension balanced, they don't work, and you end up feeling worse about yourself. You tried 1,000 times, you try your behavior management, and you're ready to pull your hair out. Versus the other way, if you look at it with soft eyes, you realize this is about a dysregulated stress system. It's out of balance. It doesn't have the resources. A child doesn't have the resources to manage the stress of the moment. They have a window of tolerance that's this big, right? And if we can see that differently, our limbic system, actually, our whole body changes just seeing it differently. And their brain picks that up as a sign of safety. We can literally change it just by seeing differently. But at least it opens up new avenues for how to approach it. So we focus on the calm, soothing, these sorts of things. And then we can get to the self-control, right? So it's what makes self-control possible.
So why is it so important in terms of children's behaviour? And just before you answer that, or in the process of answering that, can you give me an example? Because I've found when reading about this that it was the examples of when a child was having a stress reaction, etc., that made the most, like, that explained it most clearly to me.
So, it really matters because I have asthma. And if I was to, in your early childhood center, or in your child day home or what have you, and we were all out going on an outing, and I told you that I was tired or having a hard time breathing, my asthma was bothering me, right? You'd respond with my puffer, take a break, or let's all of us come around, right? You'd never for a minute think I was trying to give everybody a hard time. Okay. And so it's interesting with things that we can see on the outside. We're often really great at the kids that we know. We can have an understanding of something more going on, right? Whether it's something like asthma or visible, something visible that we know is different. But children around behavior, we tend to think of it. We're really good at seeing with very soft eyes until about 2 years old. Oh, we know they start having a total meltdown, and we know, oh, they're tired, right? Oh, you need a nurture. And around 3, we start to think they're supposed to just know, right? And oh no, it's a choice. And no, they're crying because they want to get their own way, or and when we're if there truly is dysregulation, like we're speaking about, which you can pretty much count on it is if all of your traditional strategies don't work, right? Then we have to see them with that same generous, that equity spirit, that they're not trying to choose this. They don't know what to do. It's happening to them, right? So I think of an example with my daughter when she was, I don't know, 4 or 5. She had a really, really bad bike accident. Okay, so this isn't a misbehavior in a way. It's you can apply it to misbehavior, but you can apply it to other things too. So she had a bike accident that she skinned her knee, and it wasn't really bad. It was just she had a really, a good wipeout. She comes, she was outside in the yard and just in the driveway, and she comes in, and I had a friend there and my mom who she's passed away since, but who was alive at the time. And so Sienna comes in and she's just and my mom, who used to be a nurse, is like, oh, get the clean it out. And my friend who's there is like, oh, you're a tough girl. And she's like, ah! Right. And nothing I can do is calm her down. And finally, what I said to everybody was just stop and wait, and I held her. We have, in our relationship, touch is every kid is different, right? But it's a way to soothe. And I just focus on my breath, and I focus on bringing her back to calm. It took about 10 minutes. The rocks that were in the knee were still, we're still in there, but they waited about 10 minutes. I brought her down to calm. And then I can get her thinking brain on, and we figure out how to clean the wound out. So another one might be, sorry, I'm just going to, I thought I had that off. So another one might be, I think of this little boy that, got in trouble at a child care center while I was there. And he actually didn't mean to get in. He wasn't in trouble, but he thought he was. He threw a frisbee. I was there to observe this little boy this one day. His name's Mikey, and he was having an okay day, and it was a very hot day outside at the time. And he throws a frisbee, like he really didn't know how to throw it. It kind of went whoa to this other little boy, and then he suddenly throws a perfect throw, and it hits this little boy, and he goes down on the ground screaming. Right? He's not hurt. He's okay. They're professionals. They've come around and taken care of him. But my little guy Mikey that I'm watching runs to the top of the playground equipment. He goes, ah! Right? And there's a little girl playing on there. They would have been outside playing, and he scares her away. And I was thinking, if you walked out in that exact moment, right, you thought this kid, you might apply a label. I'm very careful with labels. They stick, right? So, and he was angry. He almost could see like the eyes like this, and right. And I'm very near to the playground equipment, and he starts yelling at me, right? And he can see me there, and he doesn't even really know me. I've only been there one day. And he says, he shouldn't have, he starts sort of yelling as loud as he can. And I answered. I doubt he heard me, because again, Fitbit of the future. What if I could see inside his body? It was like, right? And he gets in trouble all the time. He's been written up a million different times. And they like this kid. They're just trying to keep him safe, but trying to keep everybody else safe from him, because he lashes out and so on. So he's really screaming at me that this little boy shouldn't have, and blah, blah, blah. And even meanwhile, he just got hurt. And so I respond back. I don't say a lot because there's no magic words, really. It's about safety, cueing safety. And I said, he got hurt. He's okay. And so over a course of a few minutes, it went back and forth a few times. Every time he would respond, I would, I nod, but I could see the stress whirlwind in him. It was so easy to see. And I think in about 5-7 minutes, he comes down from the top of this playground equipment. And by that point, I had just very slowly moved over and was sitting on top of a bit of playground equipment, a bit of the wood that was part of it. And he comes down and he hops inside the little tunnel in front of me. And he's still visibly, like, you can just see it. And he starts talking to me. He says, but how come and I said, he got hurt. That's all. And he goes, there was this moment where he goes, we see it if we've yelled at a child. Okay. It's not a good thing to yell at a child, but notice it for what it is. It's a stress response in you. Right. And so how can I not do that next time? Well, it can happen the other way. He suddenly got this cue of safety. He hops out and gets the incident report. He hops out and goes over to the picnic and brings me over this incident report and says, here, can you write that here? Like this magical moment that turned around from this little boy, and just
So
by
you're saying he didn't realize that the other child was hurt?
Yeah. Well, he's only 4. So,
Yep.
and he gets in trouble all the time. And he knew the other boy was hurt, but he somehow instantly, so our brain has, we have canalized pathways in our brain that go to automated responses. And he instantly thought he was in trouble. So he didn't, you might have someone say, he felt no empathy, right? Well, how come he didn't feel empathy? He was only worried about himself. He ran over onto the top of the playground. He couldn't feel empathy. His brain went into an immediate, we call it a brown brain response, or a red brown brain. Definitely the lower part, the subcortical part of the brain was responding to threat. And it's a life threat. So when we go into that stage, we have flat affect. We look like we don't care about others, but it's a survival thing that's happening in the brain. So he really didn't understand. He just instantly thought he was in trouble because he had thrown the Frisbee. Like he knew he threw the Frisbee and hurt the little boy, right? So, but what's interesting is his response is instant. I'm in trouble. And he gets really aggressive, and how to bring it down. And we can do that. We can do that with the tone of our voice. We can do that with the body language. We can do that with just sitting and being with sometimes. Sometimes we do that by, going for a walk, getting a little bit of movement. When a little bit of movement happens, the muscles of the upper part of our face are part of what sorry, I need a COVID haircut. Are part of what the child can read. But we can do it it's the same thing I did with my daughter. She needed soothing. So I was soothing enough that he felt safe. And then we can begin to connect.
Okay, so how can educators who are working with children in their homes, how can they use that kind of knowledge to work with children who might be exhibiting what we in Australia call challenging behaviour?
Yeah, we call them challenging behaviors here too. So the first thing I would do is think about what you're already doing that works. So, you are working with children. I'm speaking to the people that are watching this. You clearly chose that profession because you care about kids, and you want to, I have never met an early years educator that didn't want to make a difference and didn't care about kids. And so recognize that for holding already within it some understandings. Like if you begin to think about the children that you've worked with, that you've made a difference in, or that you've known just how to respond, right? Look for what the magic in that, because within that we can see some signs of co-regulation. So that's us. We're lending our calm is one of the most magical things that we can do. In an early childhood center or in a family home, You know, one of the things that you are doing is you think of it as making the weather and influencing the weather in your center. So anytime let's say you've got 4 or 5 kids with you, and you know, you have your good routines, which are important because the routines make kids feel safe. They know what to expect, but you also vary those up sometimes. So if you suddenly see that you were going to do a certain activity and everybody's like, right? Any moment that you've ever said, okay, I think we need to go outside and, you know, take a little walk, or you've played a game to dial down the tension, right? Or maybe it's not always about dialing it down. Sometimes you need to rev it up, energize a little bit. You know, you're seeing everybody, right? What can I do to get everybody feeling better? Music. So the use of shared singing, the telling of a story, but in a really engaging way, following the child's lead. So, you know, play-based learning and child-led learning is really compatible with self-reg. And so often in the early years, you know, I'm not sure where your folks are on your, I know the document in Australia with becoming
Belonging
yeah,
and
I actually studied your document and it was lovely. And we actually got permission to use some of that in the one that I created for the Northwest Territories. And it's a lovely way because many times in education, we're thinking of becoming, right? Is it being, belonging, becoming? Is that right?
being, belonging, becoming. Yeah.
If you really think about those elements, and so I'm not sure if that's still the language you're using, but how important is that? If you take moments to focus on, it's not, you know, like I always worry about the schoolification and the you know, the, I don't know, the, like, we don't need worksheets in the early years. They need to connect and, you know, and have shared purpose and really listening to children's lead. Like if you begin to look at you know, I once had worked with a group of early childhood educators, and this one educator said to me, the kids are driving me crazy. They're finding these dust bunnies. They found a dust bunny underneath of something, a table or something. And so they're becoming obsessed with the dust bunny, and then she can't get to her work. And one of the other educators so brilliantly said to her, make the dust bunny your work, right? And so she did. She built this whole, you know, and she was that intentional learning, dropping things into their learning, listening to what they're working on, what they're curious about. And all this stuff came out of a dust bunny, right? The thing that she thought was causing the behavior problems, she missed this opportunity of, no, there's interest and there's so much learning that can happen in that, right? So I would, you know, I'd really think about your understanding of play and play-based learning and the relationships, and child-led wherever possible. B, recognize that there's a weather system in your space, right? Try to encourage as much independence as you can. If one of the kids wants to help clean up, you know, you know, it's not always when I say, it's when they say, right? When you have problems. Another, you know, idea is that I have a friend that talks about the muddy boot rule, where it is that, you know, if the child keeps coming in and bringing the muddy boots in, and it's disrupting the start of our day. And so he made it he calls it the muddy boot rule. He says, oh, how cool, we've got a problem. Look at this mud stamp, you know, in this floor. Where'd this come from? And they try to problem solve it together. So all of these are sorts of things about pedagogy and the teaching and learning and the relationships we build, but that at the same time is self-regulating, right? Because you're not trying to run them, manage them. You may have to, you're still the adult in the room. There's moments you're going to have to do that, right? So it's not a free-for-all. You know, it actually has boundaries. But if you're looking at everything you do as opportunities to teach them about, you know, to express who they are, to, you know, those moments of being present, the being stuff, as well as the becoming stuff, and bringing that all together, that is actually nurturing the layers of self-regulation. They're learning who they are as learners, who they are in the world, that their voice matters, that they can have fights with friends and still, you know, make up and repair those relationships, that they can, you know, that they can feel it like a sneeze coming on. You know, they're getting really, really wound up. You could create a little cozy corner, which many of you probably do this, right? You have a corner where they can go, you know, and it's not when you say, it's not a reward, it's know that if that's what you need, you go there, right? You yeah, so those are some of the ideas, like definitely thinking of your environment.
Yeah.
Is it overstimulating? Like not everything needs to be bright red, blue, and yellow, right? You know, bringing nature in can make a difference. It should feel like it reflects the identity of the kids who are coming into your home or into your center every day. And there are creative ways to do that.
So, one of the things that's happening in Australia, and I'm sure it's happening worldwide, is that our educators are dealing a lot more with children that have sensory issues and also children that are somewhere on the autism spectrum. Is self-reg, can we use our knowledge of self-reg to help these children in any way?
Yeah, absolutely. And you can thank them for how much we know about self-reg, because a lot of these understandings, a lot of this work has come through. Well, Stuart had a center for autism at York University. So my boss, Stuart Shanker, and we, I mean, we have team members that are they're on our, there's about 50 of us, but it is a part of the work that we do. And the reason that we've learned so much of working with children with autism, and I would add in my part of the world, where I worked in education for 10 years, there's other with FASD, for example, and ADHD, and we've worked with anxiety as well, but autism in particular helps us has helped us a lot in understanding self-regulation, because while every human with autism, on the spectrum, is a different experience of that autism. It's all about stress. Stress is a big part of it. So in the sense that it can exasperate and exacerbate. Sorry, it's supper time here. My cat's meowing at the door, and the dog's downstairs. So sensory sensitivities are a huge one. And so when we have children in our centers, that have that have sensory sensitivities, whether it's autism or it doesn't have to be autism, that is a really incredible opportunity for us to make a difference for that child, because we can assume that it is a developmental, that it can have to do with capacities and what they're capable of, when in fact it is just dealing with the stress of the sensory world can actually really make a difference. So I often like to think of, imagine, I often ask folks where they'd rather work on a beach or at on the, I don't know, the strip of Las Vegas, or I don't know, Monte Carlo, or I don't know what the noisy version of that is in your part of the world. And every now and then people will say the noisier one. And we can actually understand that through the science, that it actually helps upregulate them just enough to be able to be present. But when we realize that, it's like a carnival playing in the background, and the sensory things that we touch, and there's this great episode of The Big Bang Theory where Sheldon is trying to help his best friend understand what it's like, and we assume that Sheldon has Asperger's. He never actually says that in the show, but we assume that he does. But regardless, he has tons of sensory sensitivities, and he's trying to make his friend understand what it's like. And he gives him a wool sweater to wear for a weekend, this red wool sweater, and you can see him like all weekend long, scratching. Okay, so if that makes you realize there's something going on there, just imagine what it's like to feel like you were accosted by all of your senses: noise and sound, and noise and light and texture and smells. I worked with one school, this is a school example, but they had this little girl that they thought was having meltdowns constantly. But we began to narrow it down and realized a lot of them happened in the mid-morning around 10:30 or so. And with some investigation, we realized that the cafeteria was an olfactory, so a smell, hypersensitivity. The cafeteria, because in where the center was, there was, or where the school was, there was also a high school. So it was they were cooking every day at that time. And she had an olfactory hypersensitivity she didn't know she had. And it was an overwhelming thing for her. I hate my feet on flat pavement with a dusty feel. And it's just like, if you wanted to get, top secrets out of me, make me go there. So it's really interesting, because one of the things of the magic about the sensory world is there's so much we can do. And it's not just the kids, it's actually fun for us adults too, right? You put your hands, on some of that sensory sand, right? And for some of us, that will feel really good. It can make especially a big difference for children at this age, because what happens when you don't engage in certain things is that it causes greater problems down the road, right? So the things that we can do, what I like to do is don't assume. I mean, if you have assessments that tell you certain things, that tell you about sensory sensitivities, or you notice kids are always touching the walls, or you can begin to take note of what you see. But you can also just put some stuff out and notice who goes to what, under what circumstances, right? I've used little bits of sandpaper, like just very soft sandpaper, that a child is, if they're always rubbing, trying to touch something, if the kids that always have something in their mouth, right? It's that's telling you something about the child. If you're using your sand, you have a sandbox. What else can you add to that? Think about the way that you use light. So it's not always about quiet light. Maybe having different areas of the room have different kinds of light. Using things like the beanbag chair, and like noticing the things that actually add when a child is sitting, for example, in something that's a little squishy. Are they a little bit better? So you're beginning to think of yourself as a stress detective, and think about this is just healthy development. It doesn't have to be clinical, right? It's so you've got a little guy that's you're having a really hard time with. Start looking for whether there's a diagnosis or not, and we have to be cautious of assuming there's a diagnosis, right? Because there's other things that can explain that, right? Sleep deprivation, for example, can mimic lots of the characteristics. But start looking for when he is okay or when she is okay. Oh, look, when they're over there playing with this or that, they seem relatively calm, and even I like looking for happy. Or he always, when he's upset, he always finds his way to that particular cushion. Okay, what could it be about that cushion? And you'll often think about something sensory, or this part of the room, and oh, I noticed that's dark. Okay, that's telling you something about might be telling you something about this child. My little Mikey, when he went to the tunnel, told me something about him, right? So he was trying to block out the social or the light, or, there's a number of things. They always had the hood up. So you're kind of looking for, what might this tell me? What can I try? What can I try? So you probably have some good ideas on that one too.
Yeah, I certainly know with my daughter what works and what doesn't. Okay, can you just give us a short explanation about the brain's role in this and the types of the brain? It's something that on your website and in literature, etc., I'm still not fully understanding. So if I'm having that problem, I'm imagining our educators will too.
Yeah, so self-reg is it actually synthesizes. That's what's unique about Stuart Shanker's work, is he synthesizes hundreds, probably thousands of bits of research that he combs over. I mean, he was a distinguished professor of research, in philosophy and psychology, and really focused on the early years for decades. So it involves lots of different research that's coming together and trying to make sense for the world of human development. And but there are some core bits of science that are part of the underpinning. So, in self-reg, we have 5 practices. It's reframe the behavior, recognize stress across 5 domains, reduce the stress, so dial it down, reflect, so that's about enhancing stress awareness and interoception, and respond, which is about restoration, really, it truly is. But when we think about the brain, so remember, it's that psychophysiological understanding of self-regulation, so brain and body, okay? So it definitely involves the brain, but I don't want you to lose the body in the mix of this, because that is actually a part of it. When we're completely like this, depleted and have absolutely no energy, or when we're feeling great and all of a sudden we crash, right? Understanding the physiology, what's happening there, is really, really important. We look at Thayer matrix, the energy tension matrix, for that, and it can explain the kid that has a really bad day. You know, he comes in that day and you already feel he's going to have a bad day. I will get to the brain. I know you asked for me to be short, but I want you to make sure you remember the brain's connected to the body. It comes in, we sense it. We're doing that with neuroception. Our brain is picking up that he's going to have a rough day. We're recognizing him in that quadrant, that low energy, high tension quadrant, or potentially going there. That's the moment we should do something: nurture, hug, welcome, take some time, glass of water, whatever, something to sort of start the day in the right way. So the brain that we use, we look at Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory as part of what we do. And so he looks at, so it's Thayer matrix, polyvagal theory, the idea of the interbrain, sorry, my brain's going, which is about the relationship. And it's so like a Bluetooth connection between us and others and kids. That is really important part of this, why it's not within individuals. We're always part of the equation. And then the triune brain, which would be the four big ones. There are others. Peter Gluckman, who's from your part of the world, did mismatch theory, for example, which is definitely part of this work as well. But those were the real four cores. And so triune brain is a metaphor of the brain. It was Paul MacLean's work he started in the 60s, wrote a book in the 90s. He originally thought there were three brains, and later went on to acknowledge that there's not three brains, okay? And so it's more of a metaphor of the brain, and many use it in the area of trauma. Many use it as a model of the brain. It's not what a neuroscience, the brain is a much more complex than what the triune brain would suggest. And in fact, over the years, there's been arguments against it, and they're trying to find ways to make more sense. So just to give you an example, we often have thought of emotion being sort of in the limbic system, but we actually know it's a much more complex, and it goes and involves the prefrontal cortex and the neocortex as well. So we know it's more complex, but we use this model of the brain almost like a story of the brain. And for me, as somebody that's really not interested in being a neuroscientist or an academic, even though I'm part of research and things, I like to try to think of how it makes sense. And this model helps me make sense. And so it's three parts of the brain. It's the idea that we have a blue brain state, a red brain state, and a brown brain state. And so, and if you think of it sort of as a hierarchy, or you can think of it as a bottom up or a top down. The neocortex is the blue brain, and that's what we sort of equate with being human. And that's what we tend to put in with our behavior management: take accountability, make good decisions, be able to all the executive function, delay gratification, all these sorts of things. Language development, and it's the newer part of the brain. It's the most recently evolved part of the brain, and it's logic. Okay, so it is the part where we can think through, and evaluate, reappraise, all these sorts of things. Then we have the red brain, the limbic system, which is the home of fight or flight. The cue for that, the amygdala. We have two of those, and but it's a lot more than just that. And it's not just looking for threat, which we've long known. It's sort of always on guard, even when you sleep. It's also looking for signs of safety. But it's also the part of our brain where we connect to others. It's the limbic system. It's the part of the brain that if I got really mad at you right now, and you saw me get really mad, or you might have the same response. Your brain might pick up and mirror that same response. In an early childhood center, if you have babies, one starts to cry and the other starts to cry. It's not that they're feeling empathy for the other. They don't actually have it. They're not evolved. Their brain's not evolved to that yet. They have their brain is having a stress response. They're picking up and mirroring the stress response. So it's what connects us to others. It's how anxiety can spread through a room. It's also how joy, when you do your songs, for example. I love songs. And then there's the brown part of the brain, which is the reptilian brain. So it is the oldest part of the brain, and it really is. Steve Porges says it for singletons, like turtles, ancient reptiles who for survival instincts, and it runs when we're actually in a reasonably balanced state, which we call the red and blue balance. We're just feeling, we're feeling energized. We have that red brain's not a bad thing. We're excited, we're interested, but we're also able to think and make decisions and make choices, make connections, feel empathy, all of those sorts of things. that those other systems are, the lower part is operating our digestive system, our immune system. The limbic system is still scanning for threat, but also scanning for safety. It's making connections. It's processing emotions, all of these sorts of things. So yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not very good at short. I know you keep saying, can you give me a short answer?
No problems. It was a good information anyway. Look, just to finish off, if there was one thing that you could say to our family daycare educators about self-reg, what would it be?
So, many people are interested in learning self-reg because they're trying to figure out that child or those children that they can't manage, or they can't get to follow the rules, or that they're struggling with, or that, or how to make their center calmer. They come to it thinking about the children. And what I hear over and over again, and truly is my story as well, is people come here trying to support children, right? They're trying to understand children, or it can be as a parent trying to figure out your own kids, and then we suddenly realize, oh, this is about us too, right? And it's a very freeing thing to realize. There's no judgment in that. There's this sense of, you're human, we're finite, we have a lot on our shoulders, and we're all balancing, many levels of stress across all kinds of domains. And I know you're doing good in the world because of the work that you do. If you're participating in this, you're doing it because you want to. Even just that tells me something. And so one of the most important things I would say is, you can't lend calm if you aren't calm. It's that old saying of, you're on an airplane and you put on your mask first. It's taking care of your own self-reg or self-regulation and your own stress is not you're not being selfish when you do that. And it's the most generous thing you can do for the people you love. Now, you may say, I can't. I was a single mom for a long time. I had a job, and I had, a full-time job, and I was trying to, my dad had recently died. I remember trying to juggle, and I'm like, you want me to what? Go have a hot bubble bath? Like, it wasn't that simple. Or I was in an early childhood center, and like, what am I going to do? Go take a break right now? I can't do. So I know. But the message is, it's interesting once you start thinking like this. And I do think learning a little science helps you go hit some ahas. For me, it was understanding my teenage years. I'm like, oh, I'm a better mom now than I would have been. Because, any of us that have ever had all the patience for the kids all day, and then we bark at our own kids or our partner that night, why does that happen? Because you're human, right? So, and you can do it in all kinds of ways. You can learn more by reading a book. There's lots of free stuff online, that we can share. But sometimes it's just even permission for yourself. Okay, I feel like I just can't, so for me, a big one was saying no to the social stuff. So, and realizing that the world wouldn't come to an end if I said, no, I can't come for dinner. COVID has kind of changed that for us, but it was like, I would do these things. So I do the ones I have to, but I really try to prioritize. I make sure I go to bed early. It makes a big difference for me. I turn my phone off, and I read before bed so that I can get a really good night's sleep. So, those are just a couple of examples. This is not about the come and make your January 1st list of the, all the things you've got to do. Shoulds. That's a sign of actually self-control, right? So it's just saying, what little thing can you do for yourself? Because
hang on, I should be able to control that chip addiction, shouldn't I?
Oh yeah, I know, right? And I have to tell you, it's so funny you said that, because I have one, but I now understand through learning self-reg with Stuart that that it has to do with dopamine, my reward system, and I recognize it now as a sign of excessive stress. Which it's not that I didn't before, but I see it differently. I don't feel guilty. I do strategies. I don't buy them. If I want them, I go and get them, and I eat the whole thing, right? But it's less and less once I begin to realize it's a way of me quelling my stress, right? When I crunch, right? And they know that. So yeah, don't should on yourself, as a friend of mine likes to say. But really remembering this starts with you. You are part of the equation. There's no judgment, and it's not about, oh, I wish I had done this differently, or if I'd have known this when my daughter was 3. It's none of those things. It's we're trying to understand the science is showing us more of the way. And I often like that it validates some of the things I kind of felt, and I just needed someone to say, hey, trust those, hear that inner voice and those instincts, because a lot of them have been right all along,
And that's a really good point to finish on, just to tell people that it is okay to trust your instinctive knowledge as an educator when you're both trying to do self-reg with children and also on yourself. So thank you very much, Susan. That was a wonderful interview, and I'm hoping that people will go to your website and learn even more, and maybe do some of your courses and read some of Stuart's books.
Wonderful. Well, we'd love to have you. So come and join us. Come say hello. Come say hello on social media. And if you're on Twitter, I'm at Susan Hopkins 5. Our early childhood development course is a terrific one if you're interested in one in particular. But even with no bucks, we have a YouTube channel that has tons of videos and content there. So reach out. We're really thankful that the children of Australia have all of you in their lives.
Thank you.